But it's not nearly as unfortunate as the Bed of Chaos, because the key to Dark Souls is that no matter how strong the enemy is, you can still fight them. You can fight them one way or another. And the way you choose to attack them might not be the most efficient way, but if you're good enough, you make it work. Bed of Chaos sucks. It sucks ass, and it's completely out of place in Dark Souls. It doesn't belong in that game. Because it's not a boss fight. It's a boss room. It's you versus a thing that takes up the entire back half of this room, and you can't damage it. It doesn't have a weak point. It doesn't have a pattern you need to match so that you can hit it before it's hitting you. You cannot damage it at all. It has a life bar, but it doesn't mean anything. The Bed of Chaos, you walk in, or you slide down the ramp actually, and you see the Bed of Chaos, and you see the little flame up top. You see it's got these two gigantic wooden arm things, and then it's got these two giant glowing orange orbs on the side of it. And you're naturally drawn into those, and I think the reason that they are even shown is because playtesting originally nobody knew what the hell to do with this invincible boss, and didn't know to go to the left and the right and go in there. And what you have to do is you have to go into these, you have to separately, you have to go to one side and chop at a thing that's in there. I can't even see what you're hitting, honestly. It's just a mass of, like, roots. But you hit the thing, and it breaks, and the Flame of Chaos gets another arm. This one's made of fire. And so now you're like, okay, so that ups the ante a little bit. Now it can attack me with these wood arms and this firearm. But as you run out of there to go after the other one, the ground starts to break. It starts to collapse all over the place. And suddenly there's all these pitfalls. And in Dark Souls, if you fall into a pit, it's instant death. You die. It's over. And that sucks by itself, because Dark Souls is not a platformer. It does not have very precise, it doesn't even have a jump button. You can jump, but it doesn't have a separate jump button from the sprinting. You have to accelerate to a sprint and then hit the button again real quick to make him jump. You have very little control over where he's going to land. It's not a combat dynamic. So it's not supposed to be employed in battle ever. The combat dynamic tied to that is your roll. And your roll is guaranteed, almost completely guaranteed, to get you killed in this boss fight. Because what the boss then proceeds to do is it's not fighting you. You can't fight it, and it's not fighting you. What it's doing is it's sweeping. It's literally just doing this. It's sweeping with its gigantic fucking wooden arms, and it's trying to push you into one of these pits. And that is in the complete opposite of what the entire game is like. Suddenly, you don't have an enemy that wants to come after you and beat you and force you to fight it and its superior power. It says, I just want you to go into this pit and go away. I'm going to sweep at you. I'm going to put a thing in the path of your character where you have to run because there's no other ground. So you cannot avoid it. I'm going to sweep you. You cannot jump over it, because if you do, you end up jumping into it, and it shoves you the maximum distance. It's going to sweep you. If you have a shield with enough stability, you will be pushed back a little, but then you're facing the wrong direction for the other sweep that's going to come trip you, and then push you into a pit. It's terrible. You can't even attack those hands. Attacking the hands makes your weapon bounce off and leaves you with your arms up in the air completely exposed. So you take the full brunt of both the damage, which is considerable, and the sweep effect, which is, it's over. You are going into the pit if it starts to sweep you, and if you go into the pit, you are dead. You cannot distract it because you cannot attack it. And the flame arm, meanwhile, is just poking at you. And it does a lot of damage and locks you in place if it hits you. And if it locks you in place, you're done. So you have to navigate this bullshit minefield, essentially, somehow manage to block one attack, turn around, block another attack, and then run in the other direction real fast to make it to where you can cut the other arm. That happens. Now it's got 2 wood arms and 2 flame arms. And what do you do now? So the only thing you can do is charge up the middle. Well, the ground there falls out too. And there's a tiny little bridge hidden underneath your field of vision. Like if you can see to here, it's hanging out down here. So you have to essentially run up to the edge, dodging the sweeping and the poking the whole time. And you look in there and you got to figure out, okay, how do I need to roll to get onto that tiny little bridge? And the whole time it can still reach you there. I took 2 seconds to assess it one time and got swept and fell in. And if you fall into the middle and you miss that one tiny little bridge, you still die. So that sucks. And then if you make it onto that bridge, you have to run up it and then get inside of it. And then there's like a little maggot thing that is what's left of the Witch of Izalith. And you hit it. And it doesn't matter what you hit it with. You can hit it with a broken sword hilt. I think it has 1 health, literally. Because you one-shot it, and it dies. So the whole fucking, the boss's health bar didn't mean shit. And it wasn't a boss fight. It was something you would find in a Zelda or a Mario. Because it's really a platformer boss fight. Which I think in a game like Dark Souls is so out of place as to be bullshit. It had no place. An enemy that you cannot fight has no place in a game like Dark Souls because it breaks the rules. Everything in the game. Even if it was a bad idea, you could fight it. You could try to wear it down. And with the Bed of Chaos, they just said, no, you can't fight it. You have to live somehow in this room and make it to these tiny little paths. You don't have a lot of tools for mobility. Zelda does that because Zelda the games give Link a ton of ways to augment his ability to move and to be able to distract enemies and incapacitate enemies or supplement his ability to not be kicked around. You have none of that in Dark Souls. You have ways to fight. You have no mobility enhancers. So why was a boss from what is... It's out of place out of anything. A boss like that belongs in a platformer or an action platformer. It had no place in an action RPG. None at all. And I know why it's there. It's there because the developers ran out of time. It's there because they were still working on the Bed of Chaos. They were still working on the Four Kings. Thank God Gwyn, the final boss, was probably already done by then because he's a pretty good boss fight. And they just said, fuck, we'll throw this at the wall and see if it sticks. And they said, ship it. I can't imagine them wanting to make that boss look like that. And it's for that reason that I say that Dark Souls came so close to being a masterpiece, but it's not. Because it has such blaring flaws with those 2 bosses. And in New Game Plus, they're the worst. Because fighting the Bed of Chaos in New Game Plus and in New Game is the same experience. It doesn't matter. Because nothing you can do to enhance your character matters at all in that boss fight. And I'll say the Four Kings suck in New Game Plus because they're not properly balanced. And by that I mean it's no longer really feasible for my character, the way he's built, to damage them fast enough to kill them before they continuously spawn. Also, something I forgot to mention about the Four Kings is there's 4 kings. There's only 4 of them by the plot. You go in there and you kill them. You murder them. So they are gone and lose their soul. But the algorithm they put in there for the spawning of the 4 kings is busted. Because what will happen is you'll kill a king, and then they will continue to spawn in an arbitrary timeline. And what can happen is that you kill the first king, second king spawns, third king spawns, second king goes down. Fourth king spawns. You're taking a while with the third king. So the fourth king's harassing you, but you're staying alive. And then you'll notice there's a fifth king in the room. And if you take just too long with that one, there will be a sixth king. Because the game just continuously spawns them, with the only limitation being that there can only be 4 at any one time. Really, there's only 4 of them ever. By the plot, there were 4 kings of New Londo, but you can end up fighting 6. And that's bullshit. That is bullshit. And that's something they didn't polish out because they didn't have enough time. But going back to what I was saying, New Game Plus isn't balanced properly because the 4 kings are such a mountain of ungodly health that I can't kill them fast enough. Meanwhile, I just got done fighting Priscilla in the Painted World of Ariamis, and I destroyed her in about 20 seconds. What? Yeah. So I don't think they put any care and polish into the New Game Pluses that are out there. It's just a basic mathematical scaling of the health, which eventually caps out the 7th time you do it. Fuck that. And it's just not rewarding enough for me anymore. So I'm pretty much going to let it lie and move on to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2? I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I'm going in mostly blind. I knew a lot about Dark Souls 1 walking in. I know next to nothing about Dark Souls 2, except that humanity is not called humanity anymore. And they've apparently they took all the invincibility frames out of the game. And what I mean by that is there was a couple of invincibility frames in like dodge rolling, and when you were backstabbing someone, you were invincible, and when you were performing an animation on something in the environment, you were invincible. Apparently, all of that is gone. So now your dodges need to be really on point, because if before you could kind of fudge it, you could kind of like roll into attacks that should be smacking you out of the air, but because the invincibility frames, you kind of went through them. That's all gone, which is good, because some of the dodge rolling in Dark Souls 1 didn't make any sense. It's also bad, because apparently the hit detection in Dark Souls 2, from what I've been told by professional reviews, by the Super Best Friends cast, by Rev3 Games, apparently the hit detection isn't all there. And you'll be hit by stuff that is clearly a miss. And for the most part in Dark Souls 1, the hit detection is spot on. I distinctly remember one time I was fighting Smo and Ornstein, and I was fighting Ornstein, and I had my shield up, and I was like, Jesus Christ, man. And then I got away from him just long enough to pound my Estus flask to get some of my health back. And while the guy has the Estus up like this, Smo's hammer came down right next to my character. And I'm talking like, that fucking close. And it did not interrupt the healing. He didn't take any damage. I was shitting my pants because I was like, what? Why is he there? What? No! And I, get out of there. But the point is, the hit detection was such that even though he missed by a tiny little hair, he still missed. Apparently in Dark Souls 2, some of the enemies, like their hit detection, I would have been obliterated by that and then been like, why is my character laying on the ground when the hammer is clearly not on him? But they might patch that out. They might be able to tighten that up. There were some last-minute changes they had to make to Dark Souls 2 to get it out the door. So I'm a little worried that some of the same shit that plagued Dark Souls 1 in-game is going to go on in Dark Souls 2. But we live in an age where they can patch and essentially change the game after it's been created. So, who knows, I'm going to try to do a series of blogs as I go through Dark Souls 2 and hopefully share the height of my frustration and the height of my jubilation as I triumph over it, or as I get completely fucking stonewalled and lose and rage quit and die. I'm gonna try to capture that, and I really wish I'd done that with Dark Souls 1, because even doing that with Dark Souls 2, it's not really gonna be a pure experience because I've already played Dark Souls 1, so I kind of know I know what I'm getting myself into here. So the rage levels won't be the same, I don't think, or they might be even higher because I think that I should be able to handle this shit, and it's just rocking me. So we'll see. I'm gonna put those up. So that's my final thoughts on Dark Souls as I put it on the shelf to remember it always with fond memories of rage and sweet sweet victory, and move on to see what From Software has created for us with Dark Souls 2. This is Jay Griff. Thanks for listening, guys.